James Buchanan became the 15th President of America on the 4th of March 1857. At that time, the conflict over slavery was tearing the country apart. Had he acted differently, some believe, perhaps the Civil War could have been averted. Today, we take a look at his presidency. James Buchanan was born in a log cabin in Gove Gap, Pennsylvania on the 23rd of April, 1791. When he was 3 years of age, his father moved the family to Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. His father was a prosperous merchant and real estate owner and also a farmer. Young James went to Dickinson College and graduated with honours in 1809 at the age of 18. He then went on to study law and qualified as a lawyer 3 years later. Buchanan joined the Federalist Party and was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives at the age of 23. The following year, 1815, he joined the local militia and helped to defend Baltimore from British attack during the 1812 War. In 1820, he was elected to the United States House of Representatives as a member of the Federalist Party. However, he gradually came to realize that the Federalist days were numbered, and he joined the Democratic Party 4 years later in 1824. Over the next few years, Buchanan became a prominent organizer of the Democratic Party and played a significant role in the Andrew Jackson winning the presidency in 1828. When Jackson was re-elected in 1832, he appointed Buchanan ambassador to Russia. 4 years later, Buchanan returned to American mainstream politics and was elected to the Senate to represent Pennsylvania in 1936. Throughout the 1830s, he was a strong defender of Jacksonian democracy. He opposed the rechartering of the National Bank and believed slavery was a matter for the individual states, not for the federal government. In March 1845, Buchanan was appointed Secretary of State by the newly elected President James Polk. As State Secretary, he oversaw the Treaty of Oregon in 1846. Here, joint authority of the Oregon country between the US and Britain ended, and the 49th parallel became the new borderline between these two nations. Following American victory in the Mexican-American War of 1846-47, Buchanan again became centrally involved in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Here, Mexico ceded about one-third of its territory to the United States. The combined effect of both treaties was to greatly expand the size of the United States. Its mainland now stretched from coast to coast, and it had the potential and resources to become a great world power. James Buchanan, as Secretary of State, was at the centre of these developments. Following the election of Franklin Pierce to the presidency in 1852, Buchanan was offered the post of Minister to the United Kingdom. In the following years, he was in Britain and therefore avoided much of the intense congressional debate in regard to slavery that took place at home. In 1852, he wrote a letter condemning the Wilmot Proviso. This proviso was intended to ban slavery in the newly acquired territories. Like most of the political elite of his generation, Buchanan was totally opposed, was a strong supporter of slavery. As Pierce moved into the last year of his presidency, the Democrats were again split over the issue of slavery. They were split three ways, actually. Southern congressmen, by and large, were pro-slavery. Northerners tended to be opposed to it, and there was a group in the middle known as moderates who were sort of opposed to slavery in the new territories but would tolerate it in the existing states. In this three-way split of the Democratic Party, President Pierce was unable to get the two-thirds support necessary to win the Democratic Convention in 1856. Buchanan, as a former Secretary of State and prominent national figure, won the nomination as a compromise candidate who had been absent from the debate about slavery in recent years. Buchanan also won the November election in 1856 for president. However, as president, there was no real difference between himself and the man who replaced Franklin Pierce. They both believed the Union could be preserved by supporting slavery and allowing it to spread into the new territories on the basis of popular sovereignty as outlined by Stephen Douglas. 2 days after Buchanan became president, the Supreme Court ruled in a very important case known as the Dred Scott case in regard to slavery. Dred Scott was basically a Missouri slave who had sued his master for freedom on the basis that he had lived in another state, Illinois, for a number of years, for about 4 years, where slavery was illegal. He wanted to achieve his own freedom on this basis. The Supreme Court, however, made a number of decisions in regard to this case, which basically undermined the anti-slavery movement. The three major points of the decision were that, number one, black people were not citizens of the United States. Second thing they decided was that slaves could not sue in a federal court, and also that the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which made slavery illegal north of the 3630 parallel, was unconstitutional. It became known later that Buchanan pressurized the Supreme Court into the last part of this judgment in regard to the Missouri Compromise. However, people later wondered at how the Supreme Court could have made judgments in such a cruel and basically unjust and even racist manner. Part of the answer for this is that slavery had become such an emotive and dangerous issue in that it led people to attack each other both inside Congress and in the country at large. An alternative judgment, for example, declaring Dred Scott a free man, could have created further turmoil and possibly even led to a civil war. Despite this, the Dred Scott decision is considered by historians to be one of the worst decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. By declaring the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, the court was protecting the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed slavery in Kansas and Nebraska if the people of those areas so decided. Buchanan, as president, believed in the Dred Scott judgment and believed also that it would settle the issue of slavery and allow his government to pursue alternative projects. However, the Dred Scott decision did not create the type of peace that Buchanan had envisaged. Instead, it inflamed the situation and made things worse. In the previous video, we saw that Kansas had split into two administrations, one pro-slavery at Lecompton and the other anti-slavery at Topeka. Buchanan, like Pierce before him, supported the pro-slave government at Lecompton. In February 1858, he supported this government and submitted their constitution to Congress for approval. The Senate supported the Lecompton Constitution, but the House of Representatives rejected it. The House saw no point in ratifying a constitution which did not have the support of the people of Kansas by referendum. Throughout 1858, Buchanan supported the English Bill, which offered Kansans huge additional public lands in exchange for accepting the Lecompton Constitution. However, in August 1858, Kansans rejected this pro-slavery document by a large majority. The bill was promoted by Congressman William English, which is what it got its name from. The debate over Kansas effectively split the Democratic Party in three. Buchanan represented the southern slave states, who tolerated no restrictions on the spread of slavery. Stephen Douglas, on the other hand, represented a more democratic ideal, which allowed the people of the territories to decide the issue of slavery for themselves. The midterm elections of November 58 witnessed a major split in the Democratic Party between Douglas and Buchanan supporters. The newly formed Republican Party emerged as a new force in American politics, and the Douglas-Lincoln debates became a new focus of political activity. For the last 2 years of his administration, Buchanan was frustrated by a combination of division within his own party and opposition from Republicans. This conflict combined to basically leave him with a lame duck administration for the last couple of years. There was also trouble and violence in the Utah Territory. Brigham Young, leader of the Church of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons as they're sometimes called, had been the territorial governor of this region for years. They resisted any interference from the federal government, attempting to run an almost totally independent territory. However, following the massacre at Mountain Meadows, where about 120 people were massacred, President Buchanan sent federal forces into the territory and, after a number of clashes, restored order and replaced Young as governor. In relation to foreign affairs, Buchanan hoped to make the United States the dominant power over Britain in Central America. He hoped also to acquire Cuba. He also had aims to renegotiate the Clayton-Bulmer Treaty. He considered buying Alaska from Russia. However, most of these aims and many others were blocked either by the House of Representatives or else failed in the negotiation process. In the end, Buchanan's attempt to both Save slavery as an institution and also save the Union were found to be irreconcilable. Lincoln in one of his speeches said that a house divided against itself cannot stand, by which he meant that you can have one or the other, but not both. In the final weeks of his presidency, in a final attempt to save the Union, Buchanan supported the Corwin Amendment, which aimed to protect slavery from the federal government in states where it already existed. But this measure was too little too late. By this time, several states had already seceded in the aftermath of the Lincoln victory. Lincoln had a Republican mandate to stop the spread of slavery. Buchanan left office having failed to see most of his aims achieved and witnessed several states leaving the Union in his final weeks. His presidency is considered one of the great failures of American history. However, 3 states joined the Union during his presidency. Minnesota joined in May 1858, Oregon joined in February 59, and Kansas joined just a few weeks before he left office in January 1861, bringing the total number of states to 34. The population of the United States in 1861, when Buchanan was leaving office, was 32 million, and he died 7 years later in 1868. He is buried in Lancaster in his home state of Pennsylvania.